Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I have had quite an adventure since I've seen you last. I'm at the tail end of a healing process. I'm happy to report everything went well. I do have a couple of things about it I want to share with you. When someone I know, before the surgery, someone I know asked me where I was going to have the surgery, and I told her, and she said, I think you'd better get a second opinion. She knew someone who had a lot of infection from having the surgery done there and so forth, and well, it was already scheduled. I was like almost breathing. And anyway, I decided just to go with what was already scheduled. However, what happened during the process is what she said kept coming back in my mind. And I really had to work with that. About midway, I guess midway of the healing process, a little swelling began. Well, the therapist said, that's normal, it's bone, replacing bone, and this kind of thing. I kept thinking about what this person said. I really had to work with myself on that. So I decided, okay, Nancy, you're a religious science minister. You need to do something to counteract this thought that keeps coming back that someone else put out about this situation. So I got out my gratitude journal, which I must admit I hadn't been using that much because it was difficult to get everything in and out of bed. It was difficult to do a lot of things. If you ever want to know how difficult it is, just take one of your arms and don't use it for anything. And pushing yourself up out of bed, whatever it is, it's really a challenge. So I decided, okay, this is it. I'm dismissing what this person said. And I wrote in my journal, I am grateful. I am in perfect health. I am whole. And every part of my body is functioning perfectly. And I'll tell you, from that moment on, the swelling started going down. My mind started relaxing. My mind started seeing it as being totally complete. So that was part of my experience. But you see, the wrist fracture was only part of this experience. It turned out there's a small fracture in my nose. A lot of nosebleed went on with it. And some other things too. So I made a list of things to be grateful for. I'll think what they are. I was going to share with you. I decided, okay, I am so grateful, first of all, that this happened to my non-dominant hand. I mean, that was a biggie. I was so great. And to only one arm. I remember a while back, my mother tripped on a curve and broke both her arms. And I'm thinking, I'm so glad it was only one. It's like someone said, be grateful for your non-toothache. Oh, speaking of tooth, one of the front teeth came out. See, I was running for a ball on the tennis court, and for some reason, I didn't stop in time, and the fence didn't move. The fence just stayed right there. And so I went into the fence, and then the nosebleed came, and the wrist, I knew right away it was broken because it was sort of hanging there, and so, but anyway, lots of things happened, so I was just grateful for anything that I could imagine. One of the major things I have learned from this is to accept help. I had been so independent all of my life, but my daughter came from Houston and stayed for a couple of weeks. Neighbors offered, to help me in this kind of thing. So I surrendered to people helping me. So that was a major learning, and one that I plan on keeping. Oh, okay. So enough of that. I do have therapy for the rest of this month. I am driving now. Everything looks perfect. So I'm grateful for a perfect healing. One of my New Year's rituals is to read the prologue of the book Illusions. If you've never read this, I suggest you might want to check it out. Written by Richard Bach. He also wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull and another book entitled One, and then several others along the way. The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. Okay, and so I read the whole book the last couple of days, but I just want to share. My New Year's ritual is to read at least the prologue each day. Each New Year's. And as I go along with this, I think you'll understand why I chose it as a New Year's Day ritual. So I invite you just to relax and listen to a New Year's story. There was a master come unto the earth, born in the holy land of Indiana, raised in the mystical hills east of Fort Wayne. The master learned of this world in the public schools of Indiana, and as he grew in his trade as a mechanic of automobiles. But the master had learnings from other lands and other schools, from other lives that he had lived. He remembered these, and remembering became wise and strong, so that others saw his strength and came to him for counsel. The master believed that he had power to help himself and all mankind, and as he believed, so it was for him. So that others saw his power and came to him to be healed of their troubles and their many diseases. The master believed that it is well for any man to think upon himself as a son of God. And as he believed, so it was. And the shops and garages where he worked became crowded and jammed with those who sought his learning and his touch, and the streets outside with those who longed only with the shadow of his passing might fall upon them and change their lives. So it came to pass, because of the crowds, that the several foremen and shop managers bid the master leave his tools and go his way, for so tightly was he thronged that neither he nor other mechanics had room to work upon the automobiles. So it was that he went into the countryside And people following began to call him Messiah and worker of miracles. And as they believed, it was so. If the storm passed as he spoke, not a raindrop touched a listener's head. The last of the multitude heard his words as clearly as the first. And he said unto them, within each of us lies the power of our consent to health or to sickness, to riches or to poverty, to freedom or to slavery. It is we who control these and not another. A millman spoke and said, easy for you to say. How many times have we thought that when we've heard things or read things? Well, easy for them to say. For you are guided as we are not, and need not toil as we toil. A man has to work for his living in this world. The master answered and said, once there was a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river. The current of the river swept silently over them, all young and old, rich and poor, good and evil, the current going its own way, knowing only its own crystal self. Each creature in its own manner clung tightly to the twigs and rocks of the river bottom, for clinging was their way of life. And resisting the current was what each had learned from birth. But one creature said at last, I'm tired of clinging. Though I cannot see it with my eyes, I trust that the current knows where it's going. I shall let go and let it take me where it will. Clinging, I shall die of boredom. The other creatures laughed out loud, saying, fool, let go, and the current you worship will throw you troubled and smashed across the rocks, and you'll die quicker than boredom. But the one heeded them not, and taking a breath did let go, and at once he was tumbled and smashed by the current across the rocks. Yet in time, the creature refused to cling again. The current lifted him free from the bottom, and he was bruised and hurt no more. And the creatures downstream, to whom he was a stranger, cried, see, a miracle! A creature like ourselves, yet he flies. See the Messiah, come to save us all. And the one carried in the current said, I am no more Messiah than you. The river delights to lift us free if only we dare let go. Our true work is this voyage, this adventure. But they cried all the more, Savior, all the while clinging to the rocks, and where they looked again, he was gone, and they were left alone making legends of a Savior. And it came to pass, when he saw that the multitude thronged him, the more day on day, tighter and closer and fiercer than ever they had, to learn from him and to live their lives. He went alone that day unto a hilltop apart, and there he prayed, and he said in his heart, Infinite, radiant is, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me. I cannot live the life of one other soul. Yet 10,000 cry to me, I'm sorry I allowed it all to happen. And a voice spoke to him on the hilltop, a voice neither male nor female, a voice infinitely kind, and the voice said, Not my will, but thine be done, for what is thy will is mine for thee. And he said unto them, If a man told God that he created most of all to help the suffering word, no matter the price to himself, and God answered and told him what he must do, should the man do it? Of course, the crowd said. And he said, no matter what it is? Yes, of course. And what would you do, the master said, if God spoke directly to your face and said, I command that you be happy in the world as long as you live? What would you do then? And the multitude was silent, not a sound. And the master said unto the silence, In the path of our happiness shall we find the learning for which I have chosen this lifetime. So it is that I have learned this day and chose to leave you now. And he went his way throughout the crowds and returned to his everyday work of men and machines. So if each of us were commanded to be happy in the world, quite often we hear, find your purpose. What is your purpose in living here? Well, from this perspective, from this fresh eyes perspective, think about what it is that makes you happy. And some spiritual teachers suggest that we go back to when we were children, some early childhood memories of what it was that we really liked to do, what it was that made us happy at that point. And that's probably something that would make us happy now. So this is the message, part of the message of illusions. What would you do if you were commanded to simply be happy? And sometimes I have thought, if my purpose in being here is to learn to love myself, how am I doing? How am I doing if that's my purpose? So we can expand that. If my purpose here is to be happy, how am I doing? How am I doing with that? So those are some thoughts at the beginning of this year that I wanted to share with you, and things that you might ask yourself from time to time. How are you doing with this? That's like Dr. Phil, when someone talks to him about what they've been doing and trying to solve a problem and this and that and the other. I love it when he said, and how's that working for you? Obviously it's not working, or they wouldn't be on the show talking about it. But he always brings it right back, to, and how's that working for you? So we can relate that to loving ourselves and being happy, and hopefully there's nothing in our subconscious that puts out the thought that if we're happy, we're taking happiness away from someone else. That's not true. If we're happy, we're helping other people be happy. We're teaching other people that it's okay to be happy. So it's like breathing air. Because I'm breathing air doesn't mean that I'm taking air away from Lydia. There's air for all of us here to breathe. And so it's not a matter of this or that. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit also, in addition to the illusions, looking at the world with fresh eyes. This is the beginning of a year, and perspective seems to be everything. How we look at something seems to be everything. And I've just had an experience that I really was challenged with my perspective. There were times I really had to dig to find something to be grateful for. But it was there. It was there. And once I did that, my perspective changed. And then my thinking changed. And then my life changed. And that's how it worked. So the first thing I want to invite you to put on some fresh eyes, not particularly on anything new, things that you've heard since you've been in this teaching, but look at them with fresh eyes. Look at the importance. And the first thing is, everything is contained within the one, capital O, within the one. There is one life, and that life is God. In fact, that's all there is God. So, in Science of Mind does not teach there's a duality. There's God and something else. There's God and what some people call the devil. There's only God. So there's one power and presence. And then what's so important next is that each one of us is an individualized expression of this one power and presence. Did you know that about yourself? You are an expression of the one power and presence in its entirety. In its entirety. So you're the whole enchilada in its entirety. You're not just a piece of the one power and presence. You are the one power and presence expressing. That's how it expresses in this world. And so it's all God. Now, I don't know, maybe some of you had hesitancy in your past experiences of using the word God. And that probably, in my experience, it was thinking of God as separate from me, sitting on a cloud with a big gold G around his neck, and looking down upon each of us with a scorecard, checking, sort of like Santa Claus, checking to see who's been naughty and who's been nice, that kind of thing. That's not the God we're talking about. And if that is in your thinking, let me suggest when you use the word God, you say the God in me and as me. The highest God and the innermost God is one God. So the God we're talking about is in me, as me, is me. And I think many times we sometimes get into the thinking that this God is something apart from us. But you see, it's who you are. It's who you are. So, we believe rather than original sin, which some philosophies teach, we believe in original perfection because God is in me. Or Matthew Fox wrote a wonderful book called Original Blessings. We're born as expressions of the one power and presence. We don't have to work to get there. We don't have to. We're saved by grace, and this was part of, back in the days of the Reformation, that was one thing that when Martin Luther, who really had no intention of breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church at that time, wanted people to know that God was in each one of us. And so Spirit put the stamp of individuality upon itself and called it you. So think of yourself as the stamp of Spirit. So if that's true then, if each of us is an expression of the one power and presence, then each of us is enough. So when we get that feeling of not being enough, anybody here ever felt like, you weren't really enough, but you didn't want anybody to know? So, because we are the one power and presence expressing, we're enough. What else could we be if we're not enough? We are enough. It's who we are. So the times that we feel we're not enough is an indication that we are separating ourselves from who we really are. If we stayed with who we really are, an individualization of the one power and presence, then there'd be no question, of course we're enough. We're not lacking in anything of that sort. There's a wonderful story about, it was in one of Jack Canfield's books, Chicken Soup of the Soul, one of his early books. And this is a true story. In the late 50s, a group of monks had in their monastery a giant clay Buddha. And the clay Buddha was enormous, was 10.5 feet tall, weighing over 2.5 tons. And in 1957, the monastery was being relocated, and so everything, including the giant Buddha, had to be moved. Later, the head monk went out in the rain to check on the Buddha. He shined his flashlight under the tarp to see if it was staying dry. And as the light reached a place where the Buddha had cracked, the monk noticed a little gleam shining back at him, and he thought, how strange. And as he took a closer look at this gleam of light, he wondered if there might be something underneath the clay. So he ran inside, got a chisel and hammer, and began to chip away the clay. As he knocked off the clay, the little gleam grew brighter and brighter. And many hours of labor went by before the monk stood face to face with an extraordinary, solid gold Buddha. Historians believe that several hundred years before the head monk's discovery, the Burmese army was about to invade Thailand. And the monks in the land at the time, realizing that their country would soon be attacked, didn't want their invaders to get their Buddha. So they disguised it and covered it with clay. And the true nature of the Buddha was buried with them until that day when the Buddha was to be moved. So, Jack Canfield wrote, aren't we all like the clay Buddha, covered with a shell of hardness, sometimes created by fear? And yet underneath each one of us is a golden Buddha. Underneath each one of us is a golden Buddha, a golden Christ, if you will, a golden essence, which is our real self. Now, somewhere along the way, we began to cover up our golden essence, our natural self. Much like the monk with the hammer and chisel, our task now is to discover our true essence once again. Where did we start covering up our true essence? I had a teacher once that used to ask the questions, where in your life did you stop dancing? Where in your life did you stop singing? Where in your life did you stop playing? Where in your life did you stop being creative? Where in your life did you not trust your instinct, your essence? Where in your life did you stop expressing who you truly are? Little children don't have that problem. They don't have that problem whatsoever. They just express the true essence of who they are, whether you like it or not. And whether anybody else likes it or not. But somehow, as we move along the way, we cover that up. So our job now, and there are a lot of therapists getting wealthy because of that, our job now is to uncover that clay, to let our true essence shine forth. To let our true essence shine forth. God is life, not some life, but all life. God is action, not some action, but all action. God is power, not some power, but all power. There is a real you living inside each one of us that wants to express more of who you are. Some people now call it the inner child. There is that yearning. I call it the divine urge. There is that part within us that wants to express more of who we are. More of who we are. And that's the real you. So the real you is in there somewhere, folks. So our job is to allow this essence of our divine self to express. So let's go into a moment now of silence, and I will lead us in a little meditation and affirmative prayer. So I invite you now to pay attention to your breathing. Feel Spirit breathing you. And allow yourself to be in touch with that inner essence of the divine, which is living within you, which is living as you. That's who you are. And I invite you to go to that place within you that knows no lack, no fear, no doubt, that knows only the true essence of who you are. And this true essence of you are knows that you are enough. You always have been and you always will be. You are enough. And be in touch with the prosperity within yourself and allow that to come forth. And now I invite you to get in touch with an intention and plant that intention in the fertile soil of subjectivity, knowing that the universe always says yes, and knowing that whatever your intention is worthy, is good. And see yourself now reaping the benefits, the manifestation of that intention. Being happy about it. Dancing with it. Being grateful that it is now so, that it is now the real essence of your life. And so let that go, let it be. Be grateful that it is so. And say together with me, and so it is.